out. And I said, people like that are on the 5th floor of a psychiatric ward. They're talking to God. And you know, I mean, even Joy Bear says, about the vice president. He says, it's not so much to talk to God, but when he starts talking back, I was there. And so I said, I'm out of here. I am just out of here. And I got up and I walked out of the room. I said, I'm out. And I walked out. And this guy came walking through the door. He's an average, everyday guy. And he came up to me and he says, can I pray with you? Well, my father was dying at the time. He had Hodgkin's disease in the 4th stage. It was as a result of probably being exposed to something in the military. He was a commando in the Second World War. And, his platoon, many of them had died. And so they didn't know what was going on back then. And so, I don't want my dad to die. I mean, naturally, he's my father. I loved him, and nobody in the synagogue asked me to pray. What they do is they say a prayer called the Kaddish. It's a prayer for the dead, and they say the Kaddish. Forget it. Anyway, so they say this prayer, and somehow the life comes out, life comes back in. I mean, it's kind of like that kind of thing. And so, but this guy says, can I pray with you? So my first thought was, well, how long could he pray? He can't pray long. You pray. Well, let me tell you. I mean, he prayed. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, when's this thing going to end? Then he starts to speak in Hebrew. And he's praying a prayer called the Amidah. Praying a line out of it, a prayer that I pray on a regular basis. He's praying this line out of the Amidah. And my first thought was, why are you praying that on a Sunday night? And then my second thought was, oh, he's Jewish. I can imagine a Jew being in here with me, 2 Jews in the same place in this loony bin. Are you serious? And so when he was finished praying, I said to him, oh, you're Jewish. He says, no, I'm not Jewish. I said, you're not? I said, well, how did you know I was Jewish? He said, I don't know who you are. I said, well, where'd you learn Hebrew? He said, that was Hebrew. I said, yeah, you were praying Hebrew. He went, that was Hebrew? I said, yeah. I said, it was Hebrew. And I said, it's the Ashkenazic dialect. It's not, there's 2 dialects. It's not the Sephardic. It's the Ashkenazic from Eastern European Jews. And I said, it's the Ashkenazic. He said, that was Hebrew? So the guy is totally enamored with the fact that he was speaking in tongues and it was Hebrew. He forgot all about me. I'm there. So I said, you know what, I just entered into some kind of supernatural experience. Believe me, I never read the New Testament. Didn't want to read the New Testament, didn't care about the New Testament. Never read the New Testament that said tongues was a sign for the unbeliever. Never read that. But I went by myself and I figured, you know what, I'm going to make a deal with God. I got to make a deal with him. I just forgot who I was dealing with. I'm dealing with the head Jew. He always gets the best deal. And I said to him, I'm praying, I'm thinking, the first thing I said is, please don't kill me. That was the first thing I said. I said, I realize this is kind of a supernatural happening, a little crazy, I said, but if it was real, I've always been a seeker of the truth, and I'd like to know if it's real, something will happen, something will change. If it's not real, nothing will happen. And so that was kind of like my prayer. Little did I know, Patty was in the other room, and she said, if you mean Sandy in my life, take him in, but I'm ready to walk away from him and forget all about him. I can't believe she prayed that prayer. And so the great conversation was the Jew and the Presbyterian on the way home. That was a great, trying to figure out what happened, But that was the beginning of the journey. And then, of course, Uncle Bill, praying for you, wrote a letter, and I was intercepted by my mother, who was a pretty tough cookie, my mom. And my mother said, what's going on here? And of course, I lied. I said, I'm doing a study in Christianity. I'm like, you can fool all the people some of the time, and some of the people all the time, but you cannot fool Mom.
That's true.
And so Mom says, what are you trying to do? Kill your father? What are you trying to do? Your father's a sick man. You want to kill your father? She said, you're trying to kill your grandparents? You want to disgrace us in the Jewish community? Listen, beside in the dictionary, it says Jewish mother guilt trip. Beside that is my mother's name, okay? She was the best. She was the best. And so she had my clothes packed, and I was out. And I was very, very, hurt, didn't know what to do. I mean, I was involved in businesses with my dad. I was involved with things with my grandparents. I was involved in the synagogue. I mean, I'm thinking, oh, what am I going to do? And so I go to Patty's house. Here's my girlfriend that created the mess, right? And so I go there, and I figure, at least I'll get a little bit of sympathy. Shouldn't I get sympathy? I mean, after all, I just get kicked out of my house. She should sympathize with me and, hold my hand and, really say, oh, I'm so sorry that happened to you. It's okay. I'll stand with you. I'm here. She says to me, I'm seeking the baptism in the Holy Spirit. I said, the what? She said, I'm seeking the baptism in the Holy Spirit. I said, the baptism in the, what is the baptism in the Holy Spirit? She says, well, listen, let's go to church tonight, and we'll find out. Church tonight? I just get kicked out of my house. You want to go to church tonight? I said, these women are never satisfied. So we go to church. And so we go to this little tiny church. I mean, you got to realize I went to a big synagogue. You could have put these churches that I went to in the narthex. It's in the waiting area. And so I go to this little church, and I'm sitting there, and I mean, we're in the back row. I'm not going to get close to anything close, in the last row, and the offering plate came around, and I said, you know what? Now I'm praying the martyr's prayer. Here's the martyr's prayer. So I take $50 out of my pocket, and I throw it in the offering plate. I said, oh God, take everything. Like $50 is everything. Give me a break, right? And so now the service is over. And he's telling people, come forward. And so everybody's going. And everybody around me went forward. I'm in the back row by myself. And it doesn't feel good to be in a strange place by yourself. I'm in the back row. And so I'm thinking, well, you know what? I'm going up front. Everybody's up front. I'm going up front. And I'm now getting ready to be introduced to the gifts of the Holy Spirit. The first gift was what? The speaking in tongues. So now I'm walking forward, and as I'm going up, I'm walking up this aisle, and I get about like this, and this guy is over here, and he looks and he turns, and he looks at me, and he reaches out, and he grabs my arm. Whoa. And then he stands up, and he says to me, God is taking care of your mother. Oh, what? I mean, I just got kicked out, my mother, and I'm thinking, how do you know that? How do you know that? So I looked at him and I said, did you talk to her? And I'm trying to find Patty up there. And he says, everything's going to be okay with your mother. Don't worry about it. Things are going to be okay with your mother. That was the first time I was introduced to the gifts of the Holy Spirit, the word of knowledge. And so God spoke clearly to me and got my attention right away. Nobody could have known that. It happened that very day. And so I knew that God was reaching out to me. So I'm standing there, and I'm just impressed. And then this little short guy, and he comes up to me and he goes, brother! Do you want the power of God in your life? I figured it already cost me $50. Listen, now you're into the Jewish thing. Now I want my money's worth. I got $50 invested in this thing. I want every penny.
Dang.
This little guy reaches out and he touches my head. I can't believe it. He puts his hand on my head and I fell on the floor. I'm on the floor. I'm on the floor. And I'm laying, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm on a dirty floor. What am I doing on the floor? And I'm trying to get up off the floor. It's hard to get up. I feel like I'm glued to the floor. Next thing you know, I start to speak a language I never studied. So now, one side of my brain is speaking the language that I never studied, and the other side of the brain is thinking, who can I go to for therapy? So finally I get up off the floor. I'm a little woozy. I get up off the floor. But that was the beginning of a tremendous journey.
Amen.
So I go to Patty's that night. I got no place else to go. And the next day, I go into my office, and my mother left a message to call her. So I go ahead and I get in touch with my mom, and she says to me, she says, I had a dream last night. She said, I dreamt that God came to me, calling me by my Hebrew name. And she said, I knew at that point I had to make peace with you. And I thought, everything is going to be okay with your mother. And you realize so soon, you know.
Hallelujah.
But let me tell you, she says you've always been a good son. You're a good son. I can't agree with what you do. I can't believe what you believe. But you know, you've been a good son. You're a good son. And so that was the beginning of the journey. So there were things that started to happen at that point. I started to speak at Full Gospel Businessmen. I started to speak at different places. Started to give my testimony. A year later, it was 1976, and I spoke at America for Jesus. I spoke at Penn State University. There were thousands and thousands and thousands of people in the field house. And I spoke a message, who's going to be on the Lord's side. I can tell you all the things that tried to stop us from getting there, believe me, at that time. My father came, wanted to hear me before he died. And while I was up on the stage, I heard a voice that started, in fact, I actually thought it was coming from behind me at one point. And the voice says, go down, lay hands upon your father, I'm going to heal him tonight. And there were thousands of people that came forward to be prayed for that night. Thousands of people. The power of God moved on that place. There were people laying all over the floor in that field house. It was a powerful move of God. And I walked down to my father and I said, Dad, Jesus wants to heal you tonight. My father was weeping, he cried. And I said, Jesus wants to heal you, Dad. And he started to just bow his head, and he wept and he wept. That was on a Saturday night. My mother called me Monday from the Cleveland Clinic. My dad was on a government research program. And she called me, she was hysterical on the phone, hysterical, she couldn't even talk. I thought, oh my gosh, my dad died, he died. I can't believe it, you know. Is that how God was healing him, you know, is that the way it was? And she said, you know, she said, it's the most amazing thing. When she got composed, she said, they can't find a trace of the Hodgkin's disease in his body. She said, they're going to stay here. They want to keep him here for a couple of days to find out what all it worked, you know. It was just such an amazing thing. And so that was the beginning. And so now my family is all that has their attention. And so now I saw things happen and change within my mother. I saw things happen and change within my father and my brother and my sister and all the nieces and nephews and all these things that started to happen. So I was in Boston. We were visiting our sister. I was visiting my sister. It reminds me of a story that happened. But before that, my wife wasn't able to have children. We weren't able to, wasn't able to conceive. And I was asked to be involved in a foundation. And I said that I would think about it and pray about it. Usually when you don't want to do something, you just say, well, I'll pray about it. Hey, listen, this is Dr. Sandy here. You can tell me. All right. And so anyway, but I did pray about it. And as I was praying in the morning, one morning, and it's like, I would pray and then I would sleep, and I would pray and I would sleep, and I'd wake up and I'd pray and I'd sleep. I mean, it's not easy to pray, when you're tired. But in between the sleeps, I wrote down something because a thought kept coming to me, a recurring thought. And I wrote the thought down that says, if you take care of these kids, I'll take care of your kids. And the foundation took care of kids that were involved in poverty and addiction and molestation and abuse. And so we started to take them and put them in Christian foster care. And so the scripture said, take care of these kids, I'll take care of your kids. But you have to realize, I didn't have any kids. I had no kids. I had a little girl to my wife's first marriage, and the deadbeat dad would not allow us would not allow me to adopt her in any way. And so every time I tried, he would put a thing in. And so what happened after that is the state of Pennsylvania found him in New Jersey and came after him for the past support. And he called my wife, he calls Patty, and he's yelling and screaming on the phone. And of course, Patty, she doesn't like conflict and confrontation, so she gives me the phone, right? Because she thinks I can handle it, right? So I got on the phone and I said to him, look, I said, here's the deal. I said, if you let me to adopt Pauline, I said, you don't owe anything. And he said, done. And so I bought my first daughter. That was it.
I bought my first daughter.
Best deal I ever made. Then after that, we went to a doctor that found out Patty had some surgery early on, and she had an ovary removed, and so she only had one remaining ovary. And they found that there was a cyst on that ovary, and they were really worried about it. They thought it was filled with blood, and they were concerned. And what happens, these cysts get tentacles on them, and they embed themselves down in the ovary, and sometimes they just have to remove it. But God is speaking. God is speaking. He's speaking through people. He's speaking through the Word. He's speaking through circumstances. He's speaking to us all the time. And so he speaks through dreams. He's speaking. He speaks in the mouths of 2 or 3 witnesses. He's speaking. He speaks by the peace that moves in your heart. He speaks by thoughts that come into your mind. And so there I am, and I have a dream, and I never remember my dreams. Like, never remember my dreams. And this one I remember. There was an old guy holding a baby, and he's weeping and crying, and the tears are going down. He's lifting the baby up like this, and he's weeping and crying. And a voice speaks in the middle of the dream and says, this is my servant Abraham. As I gave him a male child, I'm going to give you a male child. And so I wake up, and I just shake Patty, and I tell her what it is. And so something stirs inside of her. We go to the doctor for the surgery the next morning. She sees on there hysterectomy, and she scratches it out. The doctor comes in. He's upset. He's angry. He says, what happens? You're tying my hands. She says, no hysterectomy. My body, no hysterectomy. And so he said, well, maybe you just need to get dressed. And there's my wife, my easygoing, laid-back wife, got up out of that bed, putting on her clothes and saying, And so he goes, wait a minute. Let me just at least go in and do an exploratory let's just see what's going on in there. So it was only supposed to be about 45 minutes. They were going to go in and take a look, and she was in there for over a couple hours. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I wonder if he gave her hysterectomy. It better not have happened. I mean, what a terrible thing. I thought, thinking that thought. So he comes out, he says, he talks about how the cyst, he got in there and he started to put a scalpel in, and he was able to remove that cyst. It didn't break. He was able to remove it, take it off of the ovary. And he found that wasn't the reason that she wasn't getting pregnant anyway. There was adhesions from her first surgery. That was the reason that she wasn't getting pregnant. And so he says, geez, I think you guys can have a baby. Well, Jews work quick. So anyway, so she's pregnant 3 months later, okay? And after that, out comes a little boy. Here comes this little boy. My male child comes out. Take care of these kids. I'll take care of your kids. Ended up with a daughter. Now I have a son. A couple of years after that, out pops a little girl. Has a medical cord wrapped around her neck a couple of times. Literally, the doctor literally pushed that baby out. You could have heard us praying in tongues from one end of the hospital to the other, believe me, in those moments. Who cares, right? And so the power of God moved upon that child. So now I'm up in Boston, and I'm there, and my 4-year-old youngest daughter falls out of a third-story window. Goes right back through the safety bars, pulled out from the side of the building, goes right back out. The kids were playing, and there was like a step, and they were just fooling around, and next thing you know, she goes back like this and right out the window. And so my son Mitchell comes in and he says, Daddy, Ashley fell out of the window. Ashley's dead. She fell out of the window. She fell out of the window. And so I run down 3 flights of stairs, and I try to go over to see, what's going on here with my baby. And she was not breathing. She was just laying there. And I remember crying out to God and saying, Jesus, help me, Jesus, just help me. And I remember she took a breath. I had that breath, and that was probably the most powerful thing in that moment. The ambulance came, people, took my son, and we went to the hospital. She went into the intensive care unit, and I was there. I didn't know how to get in touch with my wife. I didn't know how to get in touch with my sister. I'm in Boston. I don't even know where the hospital is. Finally, they show up, and the doctor comes out, and he says, how far did your daughter fall? I said, 3 stories. It's higher than this ceiling here, And he said, how far did she fall? He said, well, she doesn't have any broken bones. She doesn't have any internal injuries.
Wow.
So
God saved her.
I don't know why things happen. I don't know why God was able to preserve her. I didn't know at that moment. But several weeks after that, I was down in Georgia, and the Lord, in a dream at night, a voice spoke. That voice spoke to me. That voice spoke and said, I saved your daughter for the children not yet born from her body. And,
wow.
So here she is, a little girl. My daughter has been raped. My daughter has had terrible endometriosis. The devil has attacked her reproductive system. It was just a terrible thing, hellish thing that happened. And we started to pray here a few years ago, and lo and behold, God remembered his word, and 31 years later, out came Sophie. These are the things, as I share testimony with you, these are the powerful things. I've talked to you about healing. I've talked to you about words of knowledge, words of wisdom. I've talked to you about things that are prophetic. I've talked to you about miracles. Those are the things that are happening today. I could go on and talk for hours on the things that have happened over 40-some years. They're just amazing. Things with finances, miracles. There's there's no way to explain the things that happen. They're just, amazing. They're amazing. They're amazing. But what I can say to you is this. I don't know why God does and doesn't do things. I try to present faith. I try to be positive. You try to do those things because from the psychological perspective, being positive is much better than being negative. Right? And that's just from a psychological perspective, because you feel better when you start saying things that are positive. You feel better when you're able to project positive things out into the environment and out into the future. And when you're consumed with negative things, but I have found that God has given me hope. The Lord has brought a lot of prosperity into my life. I don't know how circumstances happening, but I know for all of us, the steps of a righteous person are ordered by the Lord. And so I know God's guidance system is in place. So I believe that the Lord has caused our paths to cross here. And so I've kind of been waiting for something to happen, and it just happened. And so I'm gonna just do what happens. Somebody's face shines out at me. I'll go to them, and there'll be some thoughts or some words that'll come into my mind. And what is your name? Stand up so that. Okay. So, what's your first name again? Leone?
Okay. So Naomi, here's the thought that I have for you. You know, Naomi, there's things that you go through in life that other people just don't go through, and there's things that happen that make us different than other people. And you know, the guidance system of God has been very merciful to you and very gracious to you, because as you've navigated these things, there have been times that you've lost hope. You came up against the wall of crisis, and you thought, how am I going to get through this? How am I going to get through this? Well, you know, there's a couple things that go on inside of you. It's just the thought that comes to me. You have two strengths inside of you. One thing is that you are not a quitter. And even when you want to quit, you don't quit. And even when you think about quitting, you say, I'm going to quit, and they'll appreciate me when I'm not there, but then you don't quit. And then you'll say, oh, well, they'll miss me when I'm gone, but then you don't quit. And you do all those things. You just kind of hang right in there, even in the worst of circumstances, because in reality, you probably should have quit. But you didn't. Because of this second thing that goes on inside of you. You knew that God has come to you, and He changed your life, and He was real to you, and it came down through your bloodline. You are just a representative of all the faith that's gone on in the generations before you, and you are strong, and God wants you to know that it's going to continue in the generations that follow you.
Amen.
This gal right here, your face was shining out at me, and you have a white sweater.